Our name is Legion, for we are many. In the current Warhammer 40K lore, the Alpha Legion exists as many warbands, each with their own agendas, beliefs, and loyalties. No longer a single unified whole, acting under their primarchs Alpharius and Omegon, the Alpha Legion are unique in that they did not flee into the Eye of Terror as the traitors lost the Horus Heresy. They stayed within Imperial space, and both ran and hid among humanity. But because of this and the need to lay low and survive, the Legion slowly lost its way, dividing over the years into smaller, more manageable cells. The Sons of the Hydra mirrored what the Loyalist Legions did in many ways when they implemented the Codex Astartes and broke the Legions up into chapters. Each Alpha Legion warband can then be thought of much like a chapter. They share many commonalities with their parent Legion and have common gene seed, but each one has a unique culture all its own. In this video, we'll delve into the deepest inquisitorial archives and look at the motivations, loyalties, and actions of each of the known Alpha Legion warbands currently operating. And starting off, we come straight to the 20th Alpharians. This warband fought in the War of the Beast at Vigilis, and is currently deployed in the Nockmund War, fighting under Harkon Worldclaimer, the Herald of Abaddon the Despoiler, the War Master of Chaos. We don't know anything about them really other than they're on the side of Chaos. Cool name, and I bet they all call each other Alpharius. Next we come to the Armored Serpents, who are, well, all we can say about them is the same as the 20th Alpharians. They were at Vigilis and are now still fighting in the Nockmund War under the command of Harkon Worldclaimer. Indeed, this warband are truly Chaos Space Marines. Next we come to the Daggerfangs, who are led by the Chaos Lord Vicus Scale. This warband is full-on fanatical and are faithful Chaos worshippers. They fought at Mordekaiser's Keep on Frostheim during the Siege of Fenris in 999 M41, and other than Vicus Scale, the Dark Apostle had cast his Null is really the only known figure of note. Because of his fanatical devotion to the Dark Gods, the ruinous powers of Chaos have gifted Vicus Scale with strength and speed that far surpasses that of regular Space Marines, and they gifted him with a pair of demonic blades as well. Scale is not to be underestimated, as along with the demon prince Sin Shar, he architected the siege of the Fenris system. But all good things must eventually come to an end, and at the Battle of Mordekaiser's Keep on Frostheim, the Chaos Lord fell in battle to Wolf Lord Harald Deathwolf, just as the Dark Apostle had cast his Null was slain by Wolf Lord Sven Bloodhowl. But not after summoning tons of demons across Valdermounting. Next up is the Darganti Revenants. We basically know nothing about them except for a tiny excerpt from the 8th edition Codex Chaos Space Marines, where it is said that a Space Marine brother named Noakis held a position known as Second Sentinel in the Darganti Revenants. The 8 Stolen Truths is one of the warbands that we also know nothing about, except that they were mentioned as existing in the 8th edition Codex Chaos Space Marines. But now we're on to the Faceless, and the Faceless are one of the most fun Alpha Legion warbands, as they all call each other Alpharius, and they all still surgically alter themselves to look as much like him as they can. To regular, unaugmented humans, they all appear to be completely identical, but the Faceless do have subtle differences if you know what to look for. I must add that they don't necessarily look like Alpharius, they look like what they think Alpharius looked like. This is an important distinction to make. The Faceless fought alongside the Serpent's Teeth when the Imperium invaded the New Alliance, and they are now part of the Ghost Legion. When they are operating, they go out as small teams, usually about 10 Marines, and they have no distinct command markings and change who's in charge every day at a squad level. Each warrior respects that Alpharius that's in charge that day and follows him, even if they were the Alpharius in charge the day before. The Faceless keep it real, as they are Alpha Legion and know that they are all Alpharius, and it is funny. It leads to a lot of comical antics in the lore when they do show up. But they're deadly as hell though, completely effective and merciless when it comes down to it, and will walk through fire right alongside Akurra simply because they gave their word that they would. I love the Faceless and can't wait to see more of them, even though many of them were slain by Imperial artillery strikes and Sisters of Battle, and other things. Next we come to the First Strike, and the First Strike is an exceptionally brutal and bloodthirsty Alpha Legion warband led by the Chaos Lord Raylan Amron, who is kind of short for a Space Marine and has an attitude like most dudes that have a small man complex. They favor chain blades in close combat and wear the skulls of their enemies as trophies if that gives you any clue as to their nature and who they follow. They've been active in the Ultimate Segmentum and got whittled down to only 30 Marines during the Indomitus Crusade, so they joined up with Solomon Akurra and the Ghost Legion just to survive. But hey, at least they have their own strike cruiser. Next we come to the Faithless, who were led by Chaos Lord Arcus the Faithless, and were based on the battle barge Anarchy's Heart. They operated around the Eye of Terror. They're best known for taking part in the Siege of Vrax, and were the only Chaos Space Marine warband operating on the planet for many years, allied with the renegade Cardinal Zafan. This warband was ultimately eliminated in the final battles of the siege by the Dark Angel's successor chapter, the Angels of Absolution. The Unforgiven chapter destroyed the Anarchy's Heart, and took the few Alpha Legionnaires that survived with them to interrogate, including Arcus the Faithless himself. But Arcus and his Faithless warband were a bit different than most Alpha Legion warbands, as they were actually from the Horus Heresy era, and unlike most of or all the other Sons of Alpharius, they fled into the Eye of Terror, so they've been at the Long War for a very long time. Arcus even fought beside his Primarch during the Heresy, and became known as the Scion of Alpharius. But he had started out as an Alpha Legion captain. One of their main tactics was to stir things up in the Imperium from their seat within the Eye of Terror by spreading cultists out into Imperial space and raiding shipping lanes, and they were known for false flag operations where they would don the colors of loyalist Space Marines. The actions of the Faithless at Vrax is the stuff of legend and should get a video of its own, honestly, or else Arcus the Faithless and his warband would completely dominate this video. But I do need to mention that Arcus became demon-possessed at one point, and only through will alone was he able to survive it. And you can find out all about the Faithless and Arcus the Scion of Alpharius in the old Imperial Armor books 5, 6, 7, and 13. Next we come to the Guns of Freedom, and the Guns of Freedom are an Alpha Legion warband that actually has very few Legionnaires in it, but has a ton of militia. The warband is led by Chaos Lord Roic Ghoulclaw, but he mostly just tells a traitor general named Andal what to do, and that guy relays his orders. They joined up with Akurra and made up a huge chunk of the fighting force that repelled the Imperial invasion of the New Alliance. Next we come to Harrok's Teeth, an Alpha Legion murder wing warband, the favored assassins of the Chaos Lord Siren Valk. They are party to his spiraling plots in the vicinity of Seer's Rest. There they work in close concert with Valk's embedded operatives to support their uprisings with targeted assassinations, and they strike their target at the exact moment they are most vulnerable, leaving behind neither witness or corpse to betray their presence. The next warband we come to is the Honourless, led by Sisyphon Vale. And the Honourless were one of the warbands that joined the alliance known as the Sons of the Hydra, but later resumed operating independently. They ambushed and killed Inquisitor Godefroy Pyramus and earned the enmity of his interrogator, Ron Kiefer, which became a big problem that came back to bite them in the ass, as Kiefer was tenacious and had the Inquisitor's ship, the Internacia, at his disposal to chase them down with. One of the most notable acts of the warband was when they crashed a freighter full of Xenos parasites into a lush planet called Grindel's World, and it quickly turned into a desert world. It was part of a trap they set for Kiefer, who came at them with Attilan Rough Riders and Ogrins, which did manage to kill many of the members of the Honourless. But the survivors of the conflict boarded the Internacia, believing Kiefer's group to be dead. They wanted to leave the system and head to Constantium Secundus, where Vale had located a secret inquisitorial base. Just as they were about to go into the warp and leave the planet, the Honourless received an audio message learning that Kiefer survived, but he was mortally wounded. So, being Alpha Legion, he wanted to gloat, and Vale contacted and mocked Kiefer, completely revealing his plan to destroy the Loyalists on Constantium Secundus. And ironically, he was getting played by Kiefer, who listened to his gloating, Khal Drogo style, bragging all the conquering he's going to do and how Kiefer can't do anything about it. All the while, some of Kiefer's retinue were still aboard the Internecea and sabotaged the ship, destroying the warband and their leader. Well played, Kiefer. Much respect, and a totally Alpha Legion-y move to pull on the Alpha Legion. That's about as badass as it gets in Warhammer 40K for baseline humans. Next we come to the Iron Hydras, one word. I guess they suffer from poor literacy or something, but that's about all we know about them, other than they're one of the warbands said to be fighting in the Nachmund Gauntlet alongside Harkin and the forces of the Despoiler. Next, listed in the deepest annals, I see there's mention of a Nurgle warband known as Ranunculus Drax's Strike Force, but other than their name and their allegiance to the Plague God, nothing is known about them. The Penitent Sons are one of the warbands that joined Akurra during the harrowing in the novel Harrowmaster. But they're one of the most fun Alpha Legion warbands as they consider themselves loyal not only to the Emperor, but to the Imperium. And they are totally Alpha Legion, so they're always attacking the Imperium or being attacked by it. In fact, they only joined Akurra because they were taking so many losses and had lost their Chaos Lord Arcay, though now they're led by Viron Evale. But these guys hate themselves for all the bad they do, and that's their whole shtick. They're addicted to self-loathing and repent every evil deed the Alpha Legion has ever done. So they wear barbs inside their helmets to shred their heads and faces whenever they wear them, as penance for the crimes of their legion, going all the way back to the Horus Heresy. They really just seem like those confused teenagers that cut themselves to me, but they consider themselves loyal. Okay, now we get to one of my favorite Alpha Legion warbands of all, and one of my favorite novels in all of Warhammer 40K, with some of the best action and lore with the Redacted from the book Sons of the Hydra. The Redacted still see themselves as loyal to the Emperor and consider their activities a cull of the weak of the Imperium. They're made up of Occam the Untrue, who leads the warband, Arkin Resner, the Warpsmith, who was once of the Mentors chapter, the sorcerer Carcinus Quota, formerly of the Relictors chapter, Sergeant Ephron Hasdrubal, who is one of the Dark Angels Fallen, Vilnius Malik, who was once a Night Lord, and Autolicon Fex, who was once a Nova Marine, as well as their operatives and cultist followers, which are collectively known as the Seventh Sons. The Redacted believe that Omegon is still alive and actively search for the Primarch. The Redacted joined up with a bunch of Chaos-corrupted Alpha Legion warbands in an attack on the Maelstrom Zone led by Quetzal Karthak and his Sons of the Hydra alliance. Let's just say that the Redacted make a choice to break with the Sons of the Hydra at one point, and they go on a wild goose chase searching for Omegon, but it goes pretty wrong. During the mission, the warband were drawn into a Necron trap by the Deceiver, as well as betrayed by the Sons of the Hydra. Only the Redacted leader Occam survived. But if you apply the principle of Occam's razor to the character of Occam the Untrue, you'll see it was glaringly obvious that he's actually the very man he's been searching for, but because of his amnesia, he doesn't know it. Next we come to the Rust Bloods, and the Rust Bloods are an interesting warband as they're more aligned with the Dark Mechanicum than the Alpha Legion, and have very few actual legionnaires, but are still a super powerful force as they are machine masters and control a ton of demon engines and war machines. They were led by the Lord Discordant Zedus Keel. I'm hoping I'm saying that right. Who was considered a heretic by the Adeptus Mechanicus. But Solomon Akurra was able to manipulate Keel into getting himself killed so he could take the Lord Discordant's faction under his own influence. They don't get along with Akurra well though, and often plot against him as much as with him, as they really just covet his Star Fortress the Unseen and just want to jack it from him. Still, they were instrumental in the New Alliance victory against the Imperium, and are an integral part of the Ghost Legion. The Scaled Fang is another warband that we know little about, other than they fought in the Nachmund War. The Serpentine Scourge is another warband we know nothing about, mentioned in the 8th edition Codex. It only says that they were led by a Marine known as Brother Nemesis Alacrax. But now we come to the Serpent's Teeth, and the Serpent's Teeth is the warband that Solomon Akurra is in charge of, the Harrowmaster of, after the death of the former leader, Harrowmaster Drazus Jate. The Serpent's Teeth are pure renegade and use chaos, but aren't the kind of guys who want to be beholden to it. but we know how that always works out. Akurra has a bionic arm, for example, but it is demon-possessed and constantly tempting him to join Chaos. They're just trying to survive during the era Indomitus, where Chaos Space Marines are public enemy number 1. And once they encounter the Primaris Marines for the first time, they come to a couple of realizations. That the Imperium has stepped up its game, and that they are the Imperium's quarry. The Alpha Legion Harrows are being systematically hunted, and if they are to survive, they need to ally with other warbands, which leads to Solomon Akurra's grand vision to reform the Alpha Legion. The Serpent's Teeth are the core, inner faction that sits at the center of the coalition known as the Ghost Legion. Akurra called the warbands, summoning all those who would attend to his ship the Unseen for a harrowing. And there they voted to reform the Legion. Since he holds the Pale Spear, the weapon of the Primarch Alpharius, as his symbol of office, the Legion rallied behind him, and now he's the de facto leader of his own Legion. A Legion which he's used to form his own breakaway empire, within Imperial space. The New Alliance. Akurra is to the Alpha Legion what someone like Dante is to the Blood Angels, the man running things since their Primarch is gone. The Serpent's Teeth are going to feature a lot more going forward, as they're the central faction within the Alpha Legion now. But my favorite character in the Warband is not a Legionnaire, but a rogue psyker that used to be an Imperial Guard sanctioned psyker, turned renegade, when the Imperium exterminated her homeworld, Tulava Dine, and she went from renegade psyker to full-on chaos sorceress in the book Ghost Legion. But it saved Akurra's life, so I guess there's that. The Warband is divided into 9 separate units, each one known as a Fang, and each Fang has a commander under Solomon. And their heraldry is awesome, but it does remind me a bit of the World Eater symbol if it was Serpent themed. Next we come to the Shadow Reavers, and the Shadow Reavers are known to steal armor and equipment from their foes to sow confusion and then attack from an unexpected quarter. The Warband is the creation of Adam Snook from the Kit Bash series in White Dwarf, and were inspired by the novel Deliverance Lost by Gab Thorpe. Next up, we come to the Shadowed Ones, which was an Alpha Legion warband led by Dynat Crowbane Mal. After the Scouring, the Shadowed Ones hid within the Mandragoran Stars, where Mal amassed a force of traitors and renegades that brought the pain to the Orpheus sector. The Chaos Lord Dynat Mal earned the moniker Crowbane for ambushing and massacring the Raven Guard during the Battle of Lix in M31. After smacking the Crow Boys around, that's when he went to the Mandragoran Stars and founded his Shadowed Ones, which consisted of thousands of warriors. They launched a series of guerrilla wars against all Imperial forces in the region and went on to massacre the entire population of Amara, though it was only an outpost at that time, and established his realm of chaos known as the Dark Marches. In 170 of M32, the Sons of Korax returned to get revenge on the Crowbane, coming in massive force, but found only Mal's strike cruiser, funnily enough named Occam's Razor, as a ruined wreck on the jungle world of Apollyon. The wreck of the ship was above a valley filled with the shattered bones and armor of thousands of Alpha Legionnaires. Nobody knows what fate befell the Shadowed Ones, but you can read all about them in the old Imperial Armor 12. Now we're on to the Shrouded Hand, and they are a warband made up of chosen Chaos Space Marines, and as such, they are super badass. But their leader, Jarvel Glane, is totally gross, as he looks completely non-chaos corrupted, except for one thing. His skin is totally clear. It looks like a clear gelatin over the muscles and blood vessels beneath it, and is unsettling to look upon, even for Chaos Space Marines. Dudes with tentacles for arms and giant mouths in their bellies are looking at Glane and gagging a little. I imagine something akin to Spam fresh from the can. The Shrouded Hand once went to a world, Jarostia Jensen, to recruit operatives and uncovered a Gene Stealer cult on the planet. So there was a huge war between the Alpha Legion and the Gene Stealer cults. But the warband just sort of dipped out and left the planet once they were content that it was broken, which was a chaos win, and it was a main supply link in, well, a main link in the supply chain of the Golgotha system. Later on, in M42, the Shrouded Hand joined forces with other Alpha Legion warbands under Solomon Akurra. The next warband is the Sons of Deception, and we don't know anything about these guys except Nockmund, Gauntlet, and Vigilus, fighting for Abaddon. Now we're moving on to a warband that also lends its name to a coalition of warbands, the Sons of the Hydra, led by the Archlord, Harrow Master Quetzal Karthak. The Sons of the Hydra fought the successor chapters of the Ultramarines with a vengeance, as they really hate Guilliman. Operating around the Maelstrom, the Sons of the Hydra had a reputation as extremely brutal and vicious butchers. You did not want to cross paths with these guys. They were constantly hunting down the Sons of Guilliman and took the fight to the Nova Legion, Crimson Consuls, Marines Mordant, and the Vindicators. But the undoing of the Sons of the Hydra began when Karthak and Occam the Untrue of the Redacted, one of the Sons of the Hydra warbands, turned on one another. Karthak was presumed dead, and most of his men with him. He resurfaced at a very inopportune time for Occam, but he and his surviving men were slain by an assassin sabotaging the Geller field of his ship, the Iota Eternus, which led to Karthak and his men getting torn apart by demons. One thing about the Sons of the Hydra, though, is they were an equal opportunity employer, and often had more than heretic Astartes and cultists among their ranks, as they used large numbers of Xenos warriors as well, including Torellians, Galg, Fraal, Eldar outcasts, and my favorite, Sliths. And I know it isn't a very popular take, but I think that they just built up Quetzal Karthak to seem so awesome, as it was a way of letting us know just how super awesome Occam the Untrue is as Occam defeats him. I may be wrong here, but he seems like he's a literary device for showing just what a badass Occam is. Still, perhaps the Redacted will team up with more warbands and do a new iteration of the Sons of the Hydra. The Sons of Venom are a warband that really likes its bio-warfare. They specialize in virus bombs and caustic substances and chemical weapons and diseases. They're basically on the path to falling to the plague god, but they feel that their own personal way of making war is the best representation of the Alpha Legion's doctrines and principles. They joined Akurra's Ghost Legion and fight for the New Alliance, though they must be constantly reined in as they just want to virus bomb everyone, friend and foe alike. I honestly think the Sons of Venom may just get off a tiny bit on team killing. Still, they are Adeptus Astartes and Alpha Legion and sneaky as hell. It's no wonder they go behind Solomon's back and use chemical weapons when there's a civilian population they're supposed to be protecting. Yeah, if any Alpha Legion warband is duplicitous, it is the Sons of Venom. Truly sons of Alpharius, these snakes are. So now we move on to the next warband, the Soul Fangs, and these guys are a lot of fun. They're obliterators, and are super corrupted by the warp. They join Akurra's coalition during the Harrowing and Harrow Master. They mostly operate in the Ultima Segmentum, and honestly, Alpha Legion obliterators are just awesome. As a concept, just on its face, totally awesome. I think I'll need to get some obliterator models and paint them for my Alpha Legion army, just so I can represent these guys on the tabletop. I probably just like the idea so much because they aren't the first thing one thinks of when Alpha Legion comes to mind, which is pretty Alpha Legion if you think about it. The next warband on the list is the Splintered Sentients, who were only ever mentioned in the Faces of the Hydra section of Codex Chaos Space Marines 8th edition. And all we know about them is that they were led by a guy named Brother Vonius. That's it, really. On now to the next warband, we come to the Subtle Blades, led by the sorcerer Yaron Thale. Typhus had these guys working for him during the Caradon campaign, and he was trying to take over the Forge world of Metallica. Typhus sent the Subtle Blades and another warband called the Faithful, who were word-bearers led by the Dark Apostle Sorkanath, to prevent the Knights of House Raven from aiding Metallica. But just like the Alpha Legion loves to do, they ignored orders from Typhus, and as they got to the Lyric subsector, they began to enact their own agenda. Thale and Sorkanath joined their warbands together into one, called the Disciples, and they went on to capture a patriarch of the Inner Worm cult. Okay, now we come to the third Harrow, who we know nothing about. Again, only mentioned briefly in 8th edition Codex Chaos Space Marines. Now, if you're an old guy like me who likes even older movies from way before your own time, then you'll know the Dirty Dozen. And to me, this next warband reminds me a lot of them. And this is my favorite Alpha Legion warband of all, probably. The Unsung, led by none other than the man who delivered the sickest line in all of Warhammer 40K, Cassar. And yes, Shroud of Night is one of the best novels in all of Warhammer as well, just saying. The Unsung has the best backstory of any Alpha Legion faction in my opinion, as they were from the Great Scouring, and were a force of about 100 legionnaires strong who got stranded on the demon world known as Bloodforge. This is basically a winner-takes-all gladiator pit in planetary form, where chaos warbands from all over space and time find themselves and compete with one another to be king of the hill, basically. A world that is just grinding war and attrition. So Cassar and his Unsung have only experienced a few years' time go by on Bloodforge, but in the material universe it's been 10,000 years. And they don't know what has happened outside the warp at all. How the Imperium is doing, what happened with Horus and the Emperor, or anything really. They've defeated every other warband over the years and stand alone on Bloodforge, but stranded, with only a handful of warriors remaining. This planet is literally one of the places where the gods themselves play out the great game like you or I would play chess with our friends. And then some Emperor's children show up. Cassar and the Unsung slay them all, except for Lord Excrucius, who makes a deal with them to get them off the planet and back to real space as long as they would be willing to do a mission for him. They agree, as they literally have no other choice, so Excrucius lives and they get back to real space. And then the fun begins. They go on a Goonie adventure and have it out with the followers of Khorne and Sisters of Battle both, and it's just an action-packed thrill ride the whole time, and constantly in the background, coming at them at every moment like a force of nature, like the Jason Voorhees of the Warhammer 40K setting, Karn the Betrayer stalks the Unsung. And anyone that can step to Karn the Betrayer and last more than a moment, battling back against the Chosen of Khorne hard enough to make him pause and ask his name, only to say, "I am Alpharius and I am your death," that guy wins the trophy for biggest balls in Warhammer 40K, hands down. I can't wait to see more about Cassar. If they ever choose to continue his storyline, that would be awesome. But the Unsung are not Chaos affiliated. They don't like that other Alpha Legionnaires are by M41, and being new to the current setting is not exactly jiving with them. They choose not to answer Solomon Akurra's call to the harrowing, and so are not part of the Ghost Legion. Though, they are actively trying to rebuild after their mission for Excrucius, as they took more losses than they could really afford. The Unsung are genuinely renegade space marines, and this is why they're so fun. Alpha Legion guys that hate the Imperium and Chaos both is just awesome. Plus they saw the Scouring, and survived Bloodforge, so you know they're hard as nails and total survivors. Next we come to the unnamed warband of Kurnax Valdorius, who was a demon prince and strike master of the Alpha Legion. This guy woke the blood tide in 034 of M38 on the Fane worlds of Gan Barak. This slaughtered billions apparently. He went on to commit similar atrocities on Kinto, Lauren, and Blind Hope, and in M41 he led the Alpha Legion assault on Zorin. Valdorius is considered one of the greatest foes of the White Scars, one of the greatest foes they have ever had, and is such a slippery eel that he's known to have escaped several of the White Scars' masters of the hunt. But he was pursued to Quintus, an Imperial bastion world, by the 51st Master of the Hunt, Khosrow Khan, and Valdorius was able to manipulate the corrupt authorities there. He fought the Raven Guard who were there, led by Kaivon Shrike, and later the White Scars as well on Quintus. The Raven Guard and the White Scars confronted the Demon Prince and his mutant retinue in the capital city, Mankara's Imperial Cathedral, where he made his last stand. He had a lot of fun messing up the Loyalists until they took him down, relishing every moment of suffering he inflicted, but eventually Kaivon Shrike shredded him up and impaled him on a statue of the Emperor. Khosrow Khan beheaded the Demon Prince, and his skull is now one of the many adorning the passage to the White Scars Fortress Monastery. Now we're at the end, and we come to the Whispering Forge, who's another one of the warbands only mentioned in Codex Chaos Space Marines. And yes, you guessed it, 8th edition. So that's every known Alpha Legion warband in a nutshell. Some are renegade, some are loyal in their own minds, if not that of the Inquisitions, and some are full-on Chaos Space Marines. Most are full-on Chaos Space Marines by M41. But it is quite interesting that the Ghost Legion is made up of Alpha Legion warbands that are all over the place on the loyalty to traitor spectrum. But what else could you expect from the 20th Legion? The sons of Alpharius and Omegon should be as complicated as their gene fathers. Hydra Dominatus!